Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Anime Night in the Dojo. Today's featured show, Fire Force, Season 3, Part 2.
Yep, Fire Force, Season 3, Episode 21. Welcome back to the dojo. I'm Ryu. That's Age. We're back for more Anime Night in the Dojo, and well, last week still, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. The stuff that people don't want to talk about for whatever reason. There's so much hypocrisy out there these days, you guys. It's really just... And I don't even dig into that crap, you know? I just kind of see it in passing, and I know there's like, you know, I see one thread and like read it and then go, there's probably like 800,000 more of these, and it's absolutely ridiculous, and I hate it. But, you know, just knowing that they're out there pisses me off. It's just sickening. So, in honor of that, deal with the fact that, you know, he's just grabbing her chest right there. Furthering humanity.
Plague Force season, we're getting to it.
Yeah. So, all that stuff aside, big time fight here. Dragon and Arthur coming up. We have plenty of stuff to get to still, but once again, based on, you know, how they adapted the first half of the season, we'll probably be okay. So I'm not too really concerned about them omitting anything. And again, before we get to the last episode, I will read up to whatever they stop on and then just kind of see what happens. You know what I mean? Between our last recording of this, you know, between the reaction and then the season wrap-up discussion there, I'll just go to whatever was in the last chapter really quick and skim it in the last couple chapters, whatever's in the last episode, and see what's there, and then we'll talk about it and see if anything major got omitted. But once again, so far, at least for this slate of episodes, nothing. Like I said, just that one scene with Squad 1 that was just kind of them talking about Burns and nothing important. Just, so what do we do now? Well, we go back to our jobs. Cool. That's pretty much the synopsis of those like 8 or 9 pages. So anyway, as for this, you know, big time fights still coming. The Soul Eater tie-in stuff, however that's going to be, and whatnot. You know, just have to see how it plays out. So let's push some buttons even, and get going here. So people on Patreon, we'll see you on the other side of the edit for the time reaction, and people on YouTube beyond. See you on the other side for the discussion and review, and any and all links to other stuff that's down there in the description. Watch whatever you want, the links are there. Enjoy whatever. So there goes some. Well, alrighty then. That was one hell of a fight. I think it lived up to everything that people, you know, would expect. I will say this right now. In the last bit that I did read, up until, you know, the episode 6 thing or episode 18 that I talked about, the initiation of this fight was a little bit different based on what up to the point that I read, because Arthur does not go into Amaterasu with Vulcan, Lisa, and you.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
And Dragon shows up before Charon dies, because Charon dies in the episode that, you know, when we talked about it, you know what I mean? That was the last like little bit before Giovanni was using the key. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I assume maybe they just... Dragon shows up, Arthur says something like, hey, let's go somewhere else or something, and they do something similar to this. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the source material, because that was the only different thing that I couldn't talk about, because Arthur is watching the fight between Charon and the guy that fights him, the tattoo guy. Forget his name. Sorry. But he's basically just watching that fight and watching everything go down, and then Dragon shows up, and then he engages him, and then we swap back to what's going on inside Amaterasu. So it's a little different, and the way it plays out here in the anime, for pacing and just stuff that makes sense, I think is a better thing, because I'm not sure what would cause, how they would write in Arthur fixing you, because remember, Arthur kills Giovanni.
Mm-hmm.
So when does he have time to do that in the source material? That's what I kind of want to see happen, because where I left in the source material, Giovanni is still in control of you, because like I said, it was like right before he was plugging in the key, and then Arthur shows up and, you know, RKOs him with the freaking plasma. But Yeah, so that'll be kind of interesting to see like what the difference is there. You know what I mean? Do they bring like you
Yeah.
out? What happens? Because this sequence is this is the only difference so far, and I couldn't talk about it until now because that would have been technically a spoiler.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of change in the sequences. In the sequence here, that's kind of weird because Arthur needs to save you, unless he doesn't in the source material.
Yeah.
Arthur needs to be around to save you, but he also can't fight Dragon until the Cataclysm started. So you has to be able to use the key first.
Right. So I don't know. That's the one thing that's kind of up in the air from everything that I read. That was like that was different to the point. Like it's like now that I'm thinking about it, now that we've seen like as we watched the couple episodes since then, it's like so Arthur's outside. How does the U thing happen? And then, the rest of these changes would be fine, if Arthur was just outside and like maybe Vulcan does something different. I don't know. But we'll talk about it, when we get to the end of the season here, I'll talk about it. Like, that'll be something I'll have to really pay attention to and read and not skim over. It's like, okay, what happens here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so something about the U situation has to change. Either Arthur doesn't save him, and there's some other resolution to that, or that situation after he uses the key somehow gets like massively delayed until Arthur can show back up later.
Right. So
now he's only got about 30% of his body mass left and is floating his face.
Yeah, so I don't know. In the anime, Yu's cool. He's totally fine, obviously, from what we saw. But in the source material, Arthur does not go in to Amaterasu with Vulcan, Lisa, and Yu. And he's just kind of like, perched on a roof watching the fight between Charon and the tattoo guy. Can't believe I can't remember it's said a bunch of times. But he's basically just
drawing a blank on it now.
He's just kind of like on standby, and then Dragon shows up and he's like something, the fact I've been waiting for you, typical Arthur stuff. You know what I mean? The typical stuff that they kind of did here with the narration, which the fact that they went with like the full on like stage play, where if you've ever been to a play that has active narration as something is going on, that is kind of like, if you're a sports fan, like the play-by-play announcer, they do that for some stage plays where the narrator is as big of a part of the storytelling as the actors on stage. And that's what they did to set up the fight. And then they were like, okay, they can't do it the whole time, obviously, and I kind of agree with what they did here, because if they had done the narration for the entirety of the fight, it might have, grinded and grated on people a little bit, and it could have taken away from the actual spectacle nature of what is, an anime fight, that kind of thing. Because a stage play, they kind of like fake fight, you know what I mean? It's like they do like a block or a parry or whatever, and then it's kind of, like poke and,
I remember it was O something. It's Ogun.
Yeah, Ogun, yeah. But it's a completely different thing than, just like the play fighting on stage of like, parry, block, and then poke. You know what I mean? So you're not going to have the narration over a big time legendary anime final fight like this. And I think it lived up to what it needed. It was very good, across the board. There wasn't a lot of frames that were like just a mishmash of just you can't tell what's going on that happens sometimes. You know what I mean? A lot of characters that are incredibly fast. There are a couple of them, but that's just the nature of it. You know what I mean?
I do feel like they could have gone a bit more spectacly with it, but it was still perfectly fine.
Yeah. And obviously the big payoff was Arthur cutting the Earth in half, but not cutting it in half. You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see like what the ramification of that is, because he did technically there is literally a plasma slice through the center of the planet. You know what I mean? It got cut in half. So I don't know if that has anything to do with the creation of the sun. Perhaps that's another thing that we have to talk about. Maybe that has something to do with Benimaru's doppelganger. We'll just have to see. Because we still have the big time doppelgangers to get to in these last 4 episodes here. I know if you're on Crunchyroll, you can see the next episode coming up it's the guy, the bully guy, another guy that I forget his name. but it looks like his doppelganger is part of the next episode. So
We rarely ever actually even get his name in the first place, so us forgetting his name is kind of understandable.
right.
But like he's on screen fairly commonly ever since his introduction, but it's very rare that his name's ever actually stated.
Right. But either way, all this was great, across the board. I like what they did with the volcano sequences, stuff like that. We got the fact that Dragon has been around for quite some time, as has
that was
Fairy.
That was one of the bigger things to this whole thing, was apparently we were just kind of assuming that he was a doppelganger based on the fact that he seemed to have such a close connection to Adola, and his powers were so infernal looking and stuff like that. But no, apparently he is literally just some sort of primordial being that's been around since ancient times, and so is Fairy.
Right. So that's a pretty interesting bit of lore there for that. I will be interested to see how that is kind of shown off in the source material. It'll probably be something similar to this, But that was cool to get that. I think that was handled well. It was the perfect time to do it, the perfect time in the fight to cut away to show that off, that kind of thing. And the rest of it was just the spectacular nature of the fight. Them fighting on the moon was cool. The fact with stuff like imagination being so prevalent and Arthur being kind of an airhead, with the fact that thoughts and knowledge of certain aspects of the universe would be a detriment. You know what I mean? Arthur doesn't understand what a vacuum does, but I guess, not being able to breathe is also a problem. You know what I mean? That is what screwed him over. He doesn't understand what the vacuum of space will do to your body, but that doesn't change the fact that you can't breathe in space. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he knows there's no air, but he doesn't understand what no air would normally actually do to you. Right. So he's like, I can't breathe, but since he doesn't comprehend any of the air effects that he should be being affected by, and everything is based on your own imagination, he can't imagine that those things are happening to him.
Right. But, then you just equip the star ring, and then you're good. I have no idea what that ring was supposed to do when Vulcan gave it to him, but,
You gave it to him.
You gave it to him, right. After he saves him. Think it's okay. So let's think about this for a second. He gives him the ring after he saves him. So I'm now really interested to see how this happens.
Yeah, Yu gives it to him, at least in the anime. And the whole thing, all he does is just he gives it to him, and he says that he made it out of some sort of star metal that he found. So that's a meteorite.
Right. So that's another thing to think about, is this is a big deal for the anime adaptation. So do they not go to the moon in the source material, perhaps? Because if they don't, that means he doesn't cut the planet in half?
Well,
so there's a lot of speculation for this right here. You know what I
mean? They have to go to the moon, because this is a direct callback to Soul Eater.
What Excalibur says, yeah.
Well, it is not specifically to Excalibur, it's a direct callback to Soul Eater itself, because, as I've mentioned, the big final fight to Soul Eater also takes place on the moon.
Right. So
they have to have some sort of big epic battle on the moon here leading to Soul Eater.
Yeah. So either way. But again, you gotta appreciate this kind of shenanigan. He's standing on his own equipment notification.
Yeah.
He's standing on it.
Yeah, as if all the other frames clearly framing it as being a physical object there weren't enough. He has to thoroughly establish, no, this is in fact a thing that is here and stands on it.
Right. So this isn't just, the anime saying Arthur is equipped. No, this is actually happening. It is literally a thing, kind of whatever, whenever you're playing a game or whatever, because, Arthur has that gaming background of RPGs and stuff that we've seen all over the place. But, it's just in those classic RPGs, it's, when Link pulls out I don't know, he loots the slingshot in the Deku tree for the first time. And it's Link has acquired the Deku slingshot or whatever. You know what I mean? It's that right there. That's what that is, and it's manifesting itself because of the thing that he did, and because of his imagination and what he's doing. That is a hilarious just way to show that, and to just drive the point home in case people didn't understand what was happening here. They had him stand on it. So not only is it comedic, but it drives home the effect just in case you really need to drive that effect home. So that was just great across the board for how they handled that. So I gotta appreciate it from the comedy perspective. So, as for the rest of the fight, there was a lot of battle dabblage.
Yeah.
Okay, this right here should be fatal in the majority of cases. You know what I mean? Maybe not so much to Dragon. To Arthur, absolutely. But, once again, because he's Arthur, he probably doesn't understand what a fatal injury like that looks and is supposed to do to him, so he survives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he can't imagine himself losing, so he doesn't lose.
Right. So it doesn't matter what damage happens to him.
It's the exact opposite of the Gremmy fight.
Yeah.
Fucking Arthur cannot possibly imagine himself losing, so he doesn't lose. Meanwhile, Gremmy ends up against Kenpachi, and he can't imagine himself beating Kenpachi.
Right. Yeah, and in the case of this, the one caveat, and he used his Asakusa training, like the near-death experience, the kind of like Saiyan-esque training that they went through. But he does mention it that he should have said that he would come back alive, so he can in fact die. That's on the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he specifically calls it out, the whole thing of he should have promised that he would also come back.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really fully comprehend what's going on here with the whole imagination thing, but yeah, now it's established in his mind that he could die on the mission, kind of thing.
Right. So it will be interesting to see what happens with this whole sequence with the fallout of Arthur and stuff like that. But what a fantastic skybox. You know, I mentioned this a lot when they show off like the sky and space and stars and stuff like that. But this is one of the better skyboxes. You know what I mean? When they go all out, they went all out for the imagination and stuff like that. It was very cool. It was very cool to see the Earth from space perspective, especially in just like shows like this that have the Earth in a different state. You know, I mentioned the Fallout universe in at the end of the reaction there. It was really cool to see the Fallout planet version of Earth after, you know, everything that happens in the Fallout universe, and you can see that this right here has nothing to do outside of Arthur cutting it in half from the moon. Obviously, what an insane freaking frame I landed on, by the way. But the rest of the world after the first great cataclysm is just on fire. It's just a bunch of patches of fire.
Well, no, the rest of the world wasn't still on fire. There were areas that were still on fire, but most of it was out. We got that established before, but
it was those lines, right? Like they don't know how to get past the walls or whatever they're called.
Yeah, like there was basically the like fractures in reality where like the map just kind of stopped.
Yeah.
And unless you could know how to cross over Adola, you couldn't pass over those lines.
Yeah.
The reason the whole world's on fire right now is because the cataclysm's happening again.
Right. Yeah.
But we did see like some random glimpses of the world map here and there throughout the series, and like it was very different geography than the real world because of how much the landmass changed in the previous cataclysm.
Right. So yeah, it was still interesting to see just from the outside perspective of that, and well, once again, one hell of a frame to get that on, and Arthur has completed his mission. He's down a hand and the lower part of his body.
But he did succeed at one-upping Robotnik.
Yeah, he did succeed at one-upping Robotnik. Which Robotnik is a whole other freaking can of worms. But, you know, we leave that to Death Battle. Which, I mean, I don't know. They're kind of throwing out softballs for their stuff recently. Probably due to criticisms and stuff like that. But, yeah, I don't know. But either way, another solid episode. We'll just have to see what happens with Arthur here. What happens with Excalibur if we do get the manifestation of, Excalibur, the god. He's a god, technically, in the Laterverse. So...
At this point, like I said, I'm like 95% sure he's going to show up. That it probably just won't be until whatever like final stage of the Cataclysm is, where we start actually getting the Soul Eater world like forming and shit like that.
Right.
Whatever transition point there is from world ending to the new world that is the Soul Eater world.
Right. So yeah, tag in Shinra. That's where we're at. We got that little bit with Helmea and the Evangelist showing up there, and the little stinger there at the end was Shinra waking up. So your turn, man. You got to do something. So
the world is also significantly less on fire now that Dragon's been dealt with, but that's also because, like they were saying, like a large portion of the current despair in the world was just Dragon.
Right.
After his centuries of despair building up.
Right. He was kind of like just like that big that pool of despair by himself. That's why Fairy wanted him, because he wanted to have that like extra, just that extra, whatever you want to call it, overkill factor of like, just in case we want to have like this giant pool of despair that's worth like millions of people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that dealt a pretty big blow in the direction of hope to despair factor. So either way, great episode. So you got anything else, Age?
No, we're probably gonna go. The net focus of the next episode is definitely going to be Shinra coming back, and he's probably going to come up with some other absurd freaking superhero name.
Right, yeah.
something, man.
Yeah, something, man. Oh, man. B-man. So, anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, people of YouTube, beyond ever watching, as always, we appreciate you stopping by and hanging with us here in the dojo for more Anime Night in the Dojo. And this is Fire Force, Season 3, Episode 21. So have a good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it is for you. Have a good one. See you next time.
Hey everyone, Victoria here. If you enjoyed the video, please consider pushing those like and subscribe buttons. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for your time, and we hope to see you again in the future.